In today's video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a really pretty Valentine's Day cake. This would be for a You Hold the Key to My Heart theme. So I'm going to show you how to create a simple key and lock. I'm starting off by cutting out two fondant hearts. I have my large heart and a smaller heart, which will be for our key. The smaller heart is thicker, and that's because I'm going to be pushing in a cookie stick, and I want it to be thick enough that it can be really sturdy. So I'm just going to push that into the back for now, and we're just going to flip it over. You can play around with the shape, make sure that it's nice and secure. And then as an optional step, I do have a really small heart cutter. I'm just going to cut out a small heart to make the key more interesting. In just a minute, we're going to layer on a yellow heart on top of our larger heart using this cutter. But before doing that, I'm going to create a hole that's slightly smaller than the heart. That way, that's going to give our lock some depth. So here's my yellow fondant. I'm going to knead in a little tylose powder just like before, and that will help it to dry a little bit faster and a little bit more firm. And by the way, you could also use gum paste for the key and lock if you'd like. So here's our yellow heart. It's a good idea to let it set up for a little while so that you can get a cleaner cut. And the glue that I'm using is tylose glue. It's just tylose powder with a little warm water stirred into it. And I'm just going to brush our cookie stick with the glue and also the strip of our yellow fondant. So we're just going to place the stick in the center. I have a little bit extra hanging down from the other side of the fondant. Just fold that fondant strip in half and press it all together. And now I'm going in with my X-Acto knife, and you're just going to trim it up so that it's the size and shape that you like. For me, I'm just going with a really simple design. I'm going to cut a few little notches out of that strip of fondant. And I'm using yellow fondant because a little bit later we're going to be painting over the yellow. And it's just a little bit easier when you're working with gold luster dust or gold paint to go ahead and tint your fondant or gum paste some version of yellow so that if there are any places that don't completely cover, it's not as noticeable. Okay, so I'm just going to cut just a small little notch out of the center right here. And just kind of clean it up and play with it until you're happy with the look. I also decided to add a little ball of our yellow fondant to the end of the key. Just a little optional step, and I have another little small rope of fondant that I layered just under the heart and then just trimmed away the excess. There's all sorts of fun little details that you can add to the key and the lock if you want to make it a little more elaborate. But for me, I just kept it pretty simple. I flipped over my key after it had set up enough that I wasn't worried about it stretching out too much. And I just brushed the back with a little glue and then layered on a piece of our red fondant to hide the cookie stick. And then we just flipped it back over. And this is a bead former that I have, just a little silicone mold. You can sandwich in a rope of fondant. I used more fondant than I needed to. But you'll just kind of close it up and cut away the excess. And when you open it back up again, you have a nice little string of beads. So we're going to use this to outline our lock, or the heart that's going to go around the lock. If you don't have one of these molds, but you still want to add that gold trim around the heart, another thing that you can do is just either extrude a rope of yellow fondant, or you could also just roll it by hand, and you would get a really similar look. So right here, I'm just neatening things up with a toothpick. And by the way, I attached the fondant beads with just a little bit of tylose glue. And then for the lock, I made a circle cutout using a piping tip 12. And I'm just going in with my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to create the rest of the lock just using sort of a triangular shape cutout. I probably would have gotten a much cleaner cut if I had let the heart dry just a little bit longer, but still I was able to make it work by just kind of neatening things up with the X-Acto knife and a toothpick here and there. So we're just going to layer this on with more of our tylose glue, and you're then going to want to allow the key and the heart to dry for several hours or overnight. Now comes the fun part, which is adding on our gold accents. So you're going to just take some luster dust, gold luster dust, and add in just a little bit of vodka bit by bit until you have a nice thickened paint consistency. And just paint over the cookie stick on the key and all of your yellow accents. And to me, this is where everything really starts to come together and look very pretty, and I think a lot more realistic. The thing to keep in mind with your gold luster dust is that in most cases, it's not meant to be consumed. And so if you're making this for someone, you would just want to pass that along to them. And that's also why I'm just painting the front of my lock and key. I'm frosting a double barrel cake. This is a 6-inch tier, 4 layers, and I'll leave more information beneath the video. But I decided to go over it with a metal cake comb. The nice thing about metal combs is if you have any trouble, you can always chill the cake and go back over it with a heated comb, and it makes the smoothing a lot easier. So I'm just neatening up the top edge. You can carry the excess frosting towards the center and up and off of the cake. But I didn't need to spend too much time smoothing the top of the cake because we are going to be covering it entirely with ruffles. I'm using a 104 piping tip for this. And the thing with the petal tips is that you want to make sure that the small end of the tip is facing outward. And with each rotation or with each row, I'm slightly angling my piping tip back a little bit more, and you'll notice that you just need to do this so that the ruffles don't run into each other too much. Okay, so we're just doing a back and forth motion until the entire cake is covered in ruffles. I think it's a really pretty look. I decided to add a bead border to the base of the cake. I'm using just a small round piping tip 4. And with a bead border, you just let the piping tip go slightly up and back down again as you release the pressure. So now I am adding the heart to the cake with a little fresh buttercream. The back of my heart looked messy because I had done a trial run on a dummy. But you're just going to hold it on until you can tell that it's nice and secure. And by the way, I like to chill my buttercream frosted tiers until the buttercream is firm before adding accents like this, just in case you need to adjust them. And finally, for the key, I've just added a little buttercream to the back where it's going to come in contact with the cake. And that's it. Okay, so the cake is finished. I think it turned out really pretty. This is such a fun design for Valentine's Day or for anniversaries. And as you saw, it's not a difficult cake to create. So I hope you'll give it a try. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.